Okay.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you're all well and that everybody will continue to be healthy. This week's Marsha has a very mysterious element to it, difficult to understand and deal with. And that's the relationship of Yitzhak Avinu to his son Esav and how he prefers him over his son Yaakov. The Mefarshim deal with this at length. There are many, many different ideas. I want to concentrate on one or two of them. Esav fools his father. Kitzayed befiv, as Rashi points out. He was able to ask his father questions that gave the impression that he was a pious person. That even though he was an ish sodeh, even though he's a person of the field and he's a hunter, but nevertheless he's a good person. He's not evil. He's interested in doing the right thing. He asks his father what to do. Do you give meiser from this or that? So in essence, Esav portrays himself to his father as a man of the world, someone that has the strength to deal with what goes on in the world, but that he remains a good, if not pious person. That's how Yitzhak views him. Rivka views him differently. All the Mefarshim point out that she has the experience of coming from the house of Lavan. So Lavan is the same type of personality. He portrays himself as a good person, but in reality, he's a conniver, a cheater, a liar. But that's not how we portray. There are criminals who are proud to portray themselves as being criminals, like the mafia bosses of old. There are people they're proud of it. They tell you how many people they murdered. But then there are people who are murderers and criminals, but they hide it. They portray themselves as being somehow good and just people. And that's Lavan. We will see that next week's Parsha that Yaakov will ask the shepherds, Hayadatem es Lavan, do you know Lavan? They say, oh yeah, we really know him. Yodanu. Doesn't mean that we know him. We can tell you his address. What it means is we know him. You know, we've dealt with him. We know what a cheater he is. It's, so to speak, a warning to Yaakov. You know, when you're in the house of Lavan, keep your hands in your pockets. So Rivka is aware of that. He's aware that this kind of personality. You see, Yitzhak had known Yishmael. Yishmael is what he is. You see him on the outside, that's what he is. Periodum. He has no traits that hide it. So it's clear to know what he is. But Esav is Sayed Befiv. Esav is not that easily known. And because he's not that easily known, he is able, so to speak, to fool his father into thinking that he is what he is not, that he's interested in doing the right thing and that he wants to give the proper tithe, but he can't. And because of all of that, hello? And because of all of that, I'm sorry, Yitzhak is taken in. And Yitzhak is convinced that somehow Esav can carry on what has to be carried on. He can be the heir. He can receive the brachot. In fact, he feels that he is more fitting than is Yaakov, because Yaakov is Ishtom Yoshev Oholim. How is Yaakov going to be able to compete in a world of Avimelech and all of the problems, all of the subterfuges, all of the intrigues? Yaakov is not up to it. Yaakov is, he's a good boy. He's a yeshiva man. Good, fine. But I'm not going to make him chief of staff. I'm not going to make him the head of the country. That's not within his power. Can you just excuse me just for a minute? Hello? Hello? Ring. So in any event, Yitzhak is convinced that the future really is only if he controls Esav, if he gives Esav the brachos, because Esav intrinsically is good, and Esav has the weapons in which to be successful in this world. Esav is assertive, he's strong, he's aggressive. The world has great respect for Esav. So he's the one. Yaakov is Ishtam Yoshev Oholim. He doesn't think that he can do it. He doesn't think that it's going to happen with Yaakov. Rivka understands what Esav really is, again, because she's raised in the house of Lavan and Psuel. She knows them inside out. And unfortunately, she recognizes that her son Esav has all of those qualities, and that the questions that he poses to his father are really only a sham. He doesn't mean it. So therefore, she says we have to give Yaakov every advantage possible, because only through Yaakov will the inheritance of Avraham and Yitzchak exist and be passed on to later generations. So to a certain extent, Yitzchak is, so to speak, naive and myopic regarding the sons, and Rivka is much more hard-headed and realistic. And the Meforshim point that out, because it says, Vayiki Zoken Yitzchak, when Yitzchak became old, Vaticheno Einov Meros. His eyes dimmed, Meros, he could no longer see. So all the Meforshim point out that that's a double language. It already said Vatichena Einov, his eyes dimmed, so he know he can't see. Why does it have to say Meros? His eyes dimmed from that he couldn't see anymore. So therefore, they say that the idea here, and that's one of the insights, is Meros is not just physical sight. but it is seeing the entire picture, understanding, going to the depths of the situation, recognizing the entire struggle here. That's what Me'os means. So it's not only that his eyes were dimmed. That's bad enough. If you cannot see, it's a terrible handicap. But worse than that is Me'os, that you can't understand and can't see the picture. You don't get it. You don't understand what's happening here. And that is what leads to tragedy. That's what leads to this description in the Torah of the events. Rashi points out, very interestingly, Rashi points out, why did Yitzhak suffer from not being able to see? So Rashi says two pshatim. One pshat is that when he was bound on the altar of the Akedah, the tears of the angels from heaven fell into his eyes, and that later on produced his blindness. Then Rashi says an alternate pshat, that because Esav brought into the house foreign women who were pagans, who were idolaters, and they offered up incense to their false gods. So the smoke of their incense came into Yitzchak's eyes, and therefore he could not see. So the Mefarshim dwell on those two explanations of why Yitzchak could not see. And there's great relevance to almost prophecy in what they say. The first reason was that he is bound on the altar. It's the persecution of the Jewish people. It's the fact that we, so to speak, are always bound on the altar. We're always in danger. And since we're in mortal danger, we don't see our future. How can we see our future if the Holocaust happened only 80 years ago? So there's no way that we can have a sense of the future, because the present is so dangerous for us. And because the memories of the past are so vivid, they're burned into our subconscious. I always say that only people who believe it can happen again say never again. The Chinese don't say never again. The Russians don't say never again. Because to them, it's not a possibility. To us, it is, unfortunately, a possibility. We have to say never again because it's possible that it can happen again, Rahman al-Islam. So you can't see because of the tsuris, because of the troubles, because of the persecution, because of anti-Semitism, and because of the United Nations, because of whatever, you name it. They can say whatever you want about it. That is the reason that you can't see. Can't see the future. Then we have the second stream, the second interpretation. You can't see because there's avodah zarah in the house. There's the smoke of incense to foreign gods. There's assimilation. There's the desertion of the covenant of Avraham. All of the terrible things that afflict the Jewish society today, if you look at it. Nisharnu ma'at ma'arbe. There's only a few left, right? No matter how successful we have been, but we're still only a minority within a minority. So what's going to be the future? How can you see anything? And that's what it means, Vatichena ein of meros. Yitzhak couldn't see. Not that he couldn't see physically, which is also true, but he couldn't see the future. He's got Avodah Zarah in his house. He's got a simulation in his house. He's got incense burning to false gods in his house. He's got enemies on the outside that want to destroy him. Where's his future? How does he see it? So therefore, he comes to the conclusion that the only way he can see it is through Esav. Because Esav will be strong enough to fight on the outside. And since he believes that Esav intrinsically is a good person, so he'll be able to survive even the smoke of the idolaters on the inside, even though it's Esav's wives that are burning the incense. And Yitzhak feels he has no choice because his only other option is Yaakov. And Yaakov is Ishtam Yoshev Oholim, right? My father told me that in Eastern Europe, when he grew up after the First World War, if you said somebody was a yeshiva bocher, that was an insult. It was not a compliment. That meant he was a botlin. He's no good for anything. He can't do anything. I remember when I was first married and we had our own home in Chicago. So until then, we had all lived in apartments, but now we had a home. So I had a backyard. I wanted to build a sukkah. I wanted to have my own sukkah. I never had my father never had his own sukkah. We always used to walk down the block to the yeshiva. We never had a good hot meal in the sukkah. Any event, so I hired a Jewish carpenter to build the sukkah. Well, you know that I'm an expert in everything. So I used to go outside and supervise him. That he this, that, I'll tell him Allah. So finally he got exasperated with me. And he said to me, he said it in Yiddish, Herzachain junger Mann, listen to me, my young man. Das is nicht kein Blatt Gemara. This is not a page in the Gemara. Das darf man kennen. This you have to know what you're doing. And that was the attitude. Blatt Gemara, you don't have to know what you're doing or not. That's a botlin. That's not in the real world. In the real world, darf man kennen, you got to know exactly what you're doing. So Yitzhak figures that's Esav. It's not going to be Yaakov. How is Yaakov going to be able to make it in that world? So Yitzhak Meros, Yitzhak doesn't see the picture. He is unable to see the picture that somehow, that through Yaakov, the future of the Jewish people is guaranteed. He doesn't see that Yaakov can be as strong as Esav, that he can wrestle with the angel, that he can produce children that can destroy the city of Shechem. He doesn't see that. Because Yaakov doesn't exhibit that to him. Chazal say an interesting point. Ish Tom. So we say Ish Tom is like a mild person. Like on the Pesach Haggadah, Tom Mahu Omer. Tom. But there are those that say Tom is like Tomim, meaning perfection. Yaakov was everything. He, out to the outside, he exhibited mildness, courtesy, humility. But within him, he has every facility in the world. He can do whatever he wants. He can be the great warrior. He could be the shrewd businessman that can deal with Lavan. He can triumph. In Lavan Garti, V'tayag Mitzvah Shamarti. He's the whole package. That's what Tom means. And therefore, this is what Rivka sees in him. But Yitzhak is Vatechena Einov Meros. He doesn't see it in him. And because he doesn't see it in him, he makes this fateful decision to tell Esav to bring him the meal and he'll give him the brachos. Now, there's a famous piece in the Meshech Chochmah of Meir Simcha on this week's Parsha that illustrates this. Later on, when Yaakov enters the room, so Rashi quotes the Medrash that Gan Eden entered with him, the fragrance of Gan Eden. And that when Esav entered the room, the fires of hell came in with him. And that Yitzhak recognized that with Yaakov came Gan Eden, and with Esav came Gehenna. So there it says in the Torah, Re'ei reach b'ni kereach sodeh asher beracho Hashem. So Rashi points out, who said that? So simple explanation that we look at it is that Yitzhak said it. Yitzhak said, look, the fragrance of my son, Rashi says, was the fragrance of an apple orchard in bloom, is like the fragrance of the field that the Lord has blessed. But there's an alternate pshat that Rashi also says. Re'ei, re'ach b'ni, kereach sodeh asher beracho Hashem. The Ruach HaKodesh said it, not Yitzchak. The Rebbeinu Shalom Kaviyachol, the prophecy said it to him. And therefore it said, Re'ei, it didn't say the fragrance is the sense of smell, not of sight. So why did it say Re'ei? You cannot see Re'ei, Re'ach. You cannot see a fragrance. You can smell it. You can sense it, but you can't see it. So it's again the interpretation we said before, Re'ei, now you can see the whole picture. Now see Yaakov in his true light. See that with him comes Gan Eden. And now you can see your future also. Because you thought that without Esav you have no future. Without somehow having the attributes of Esav on your side, if you don't have the Yodayim, Yodei Esav, then you're not going to be able to make it. So the Torah came and said, no, if you have the Kol Yaakov, that's sufficient for you to make it. Ray, see that. Understand that. Take it into consideration. And that's what the Ruach HaKodesh told Yitzchak. And that's why when Esav comes later and he says he stole the brachas from me, yeah, Yitzhak says, but I gave him the brachas and Gam Baruch Yiyeh, and I agree that he should have it because now I see it differently. Now I see it differently. Now I'm able to see that my future lies with Yaakov. And that is such a strong and powerful message for all times for the Jewish people. That our salvation always lies in our Kol Yaakov. And the Kol Yaakov gives us also the ability that when necessary, we are also the Yodayim Yedei Esav. But if we're only the Yodayim Yedei Esav without the Kol Yaakov, then it's of no value whatsoever. Then we've lost our way. So this parsha is always like the other parshas and brachas, the Maisa Ovos Siman Labonim. What happened to our forefathers comes as a guidepost to later generations, to our generations, faced with so many problems and challenges. So we don't see a way out, right? We can't see how we cope. How long do we have to stay in this isolation? How long do we have to suffer all of the negative impact, and we don't know what's going to be, and then there are new governments and there are going to be new ideas, and who knows what's going to be, right? There's plenty of room for pessimism, God forbid, or at least for concern and anxiety. But the Torah came to tell us, hey, come on, see the whole picture. Reach b'ni k'reach sodeh asher beracho Hashem. Yaakov brings Gan Eden into the world. He brings us to paradise. He brings us to eternity. He brings us to the great future. So you have to be able to see that. See it in your mind. See it mentally. And see it in your heart and believe in it. And don't be frightened of it. And that's the faith of the Jewish people throughout the generations. And in our generations as well. The test is always emunah, faith. Let's see how we act now in the face of all of our problems and challenges. So we have to confront Esav in the world because he is there. He has many faces. He has many philosophies. He dresses in many garbs, but he's there. And as we will see in next week's Parsha, we have to confront Lavan, who is our erstwhile ally and friend, who's our mechutin. But Lavan says, Abonim bonai v'abononos b'nosai, the children belong to me, not to you. And that's a great challenge as well. So Yaakov Avinu is the symbol of overcoming these challenges, of rising above them, of being able to pursue goodness and greatness with whatever powers and talents he has, and he has many, just as the Jewish people do, and just as each and every one of us does. So this is a valuable lesson for us, this week's Parsha, because it's an editorial in today's paper. It's a description of our times and of our issues and of how we will also triumph, and that we will also be able to say, Lovon Garti, V'taryag Mitzvah Shamarti, we overcome Lovon and we'll overcome Esav, Olu Moshim, Bahar Tzion, Lishpodas Har Esav, V'Yisol Hashem Amlucha. That's been our goal from time immemorial and remains so until today. And we should therefore be of good heart and good cheer, because we have the Kol Yaakov that resonates within us and gives us sight and vision and an understanding and a future. I want to thank you all for listening, and have a great Shabbat. And Saturday night we have a lecture at 8 o'clock. And again, I thank you all for your friendship and interest. Shabbat Shalom.